Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello there. Welcome back to Lost Signals Presents Literature and Literature Reviews. I am your God-eating host, Scott Thurlow, and I'm here tonight with my fellow, pallbearers. We'll get to it. Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Oh, I'm the god being eaten, of course.
Yeah, true, of course. And Chris Morgan.
Hello.
And tonight we're going to discuss a short story, which again I sort of found. What I actually looked up was short cyberpunk well-reviewed stories, like something like that. I was on a brief cyberpunk kink, which either one. But what came up was the story called the parentheses Not So Midas Touch, and then 2N5E, written by Yuki Iwama. So, and it had like a very interesting log line, something like in a world where gods are swallowed, something like that, and like that kind of like sold me on it. So it's a super short story. We'll have the link in the description and everything. And so traditionally, I guess we'll give our scores, but this one is a little bit of an odd duck to do that with. So I'll just start out with mine. I have it as a 5 right now, but as we said and many times previously, that might just be an artifact of the nature of the way we have our scale set up. It does not necessarily reflection on the quality of the story itself and so forth. So with that, Chris, what did you score it?
I gave it a 5 as well.
Okay. Any?
I gave it a 6 to begin with. I reread this 3 times, and I'm not quite sure I got it if it is to be gotten, which makes it difficult to judge. Perhaps upon reflection and discussion, as we have this meeting of minds, we'll shed some light on this. But as of right now, it's getting it's a 6 because it's a good story. I don't know necessarily what's going on.
Right, but I guess what does it mean? I suppose, and I agree with you. Like you even said, I read it twice. Yeah, you're good. What's up, Chris? You got some?
I was gonna say, Ian, is your microphone on? Because
My microphone is on. Yes.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so like to your point, like maybe just like, us being thick, or maybe the story is like too obfuscating enough. Like, and not that it's like unclear, but it's also just sort of weird, not quite magical realism, right? But it has this like dreamlike, like not unearthly quality to it. And again, it's very short, and you're not sure what's happening. Like, I mean, you are sure, but also not, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I guess the tentpole of this, what I start out with, is like, is it a metaphor for something? And if so, what? Because to your point, E, I couldn't say exactly. Like, perhaps I'm missing something, but
well, if I may, it starts off with a poem by Stephen Crane. In the desert, I saw a creature naked, bestial, who, squatting upon the ground, held his heart in his hands and ate of it. I said, "Is it good, friend?" "It is bitter." "Bitter," he answered, "but I like it because it is bitter, because it is my heart." This has as much clarity as the poem,
as the Stinger poem.
My initial impressions of this work was the falsity of ideology and the grasping of, when presented with the strange, with the unusual, coming up with a meaning to it. The story is that they found this almost meteorite-like or molten object from the core risen, and they start worshiping it like a god, and people desire devouring it because for the promise of immortality. But they're scientists trying to recreate it. And beyond that, I that's the impression I got out of it. It's that finding something and assigning significance to it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, it seems to me like it was a metaphor, like what's the other, an analogy for something or something like that. But I can't say whether it's like the fault of the writing that didn't come through or fault of me as a reader that didn't get what it was supposed to be. So it centers on a priest who dies because ostensibly he ate of the molten rock, and it's his funeral, and it's just sort of like again a strange dreamlike almost scenario, like scene from there. So yeah, Chris, I mean, like, do you got any thoughts one way or another, like what it's supposed to mean or what you thought it meant?
He and this guy, I think his name is Ferry.
One other, like the narrator and
the narrator. There's one part where he was working on a small time case. The wife did it, so he's in some kind of law enforcement, and then Ferry's the guy there who's chewing tobacco and eating oranges and commenting on the whole thing. He's just like, he was really presenting the things where you could tell he's he believes in something, but he doesn't like the pop and circumstance around it. He doesn't like religion. One of you guys said it better, and I can't remember what it was exactly you said. But at the end, when the protagonist cuts the stomach open and finds a fossilized organ, he said, I know now that if I keep digging, I'll find the Midas gold. And the implication is then he smacks and maybe potentially kills Ferry and leaves the idol with him, which could add it to either that, that could be a metaphor like, I now have proof of God, but I can't let you walk away with this knowledge. Or
sure.
He decided to kill him and have the idol there and make it look like God's wrath. So I was kind of intrigued, and I'm still sitting with it, but right away, based on what you guys had said, that was kind of my takeaway.
I mean, I like those ideas, Chris. I think perhaps this is a case of when it's purposely unclear. Maybe that's the whole point. You can take away any of those angles, but it also leaves it unclear enough that I feel like there could be just a little bit more substance there to perhaps impart whatever like message that the author was trying to, if indeed that was the point of it. And if it wasn't, then okay, like that's fine. I totally respect that. But again, I feel like we've come up with stories like this throughout, here and there throughout, where it's like it leaves just enough up to you as the audience, and like paints a vague enough picture, but with like all these fuzzy details or details that aren't quite there to make the big picture.
Like, for instance, there's a reference to a plague of some type,
right?
Hit.
It's like dropped in there.
Whether it's a result of the consumption of the god, whether it happened naturally, right, I'm unclear about. But that's my example of that kind of ambiguity. I don't know.
No, you're right. Exactly. That's. I guess that's the thing we write. Like, I do think the style. I like the way it was written. I gave style a 1. I'll tell you guys that much on that front. But and I admittedly, I'm sort of a sucker for these kinds of things. But it's a very fine line sometimes to try to do something like this, where whether it comes off like either, like you said, like not pretentious per se, but like, oh, you didn't get it, like it was obvious. Like, was it though? Like it was, and if so, how and where, right? Or maybe just meant to be like a discussion-ish piece. Like it has just enough of those like analogy features, like you were saying, right? Like, okay, it could represent this or that. Like they dropped in the fact of the pandemic, etc. Like you said, like I said, like has a few details filled in, a few like world building elements, but certainly not enough to like in the span of time and in the space that the story breathes in to like really arrive at anything one way or another, even though I think it's an interesting, at least discussion piece for sure, like at this point, right? And well written on the surface, at least. So I don't know. You got something else, Chris?
No, I gave it a 2 because I liked the
plot.
I liked the setting, and I don't know. I just got the feeling of like I could actually picture a room where 2 guys sitting there watching a funeral procession go by an open casket, and I could see this as a conversation there. Like I was really kind of caught in the atmosphere, and I'm giving themes 1 because that kind of ties into everything.
I did too.
Because I kind of put him in this like little gray nebulous thing because there was enough there descriptor wise for me to immerse myself in where they were. I was intrigued enough with what they were saying and trying to figure that out. And then you'd then have to tie that in thematically. So, it works for me.
It worked for me as well. The impression I was getting throughout this was almost Dust Bowl era, like the kind of preacher being. Like, I imagine this ramshackle town hall where they're
Edwardstown thing or whatever.
Yeah, but like the 1940s style detective there. I picture Farley in the overalls, spitting tobacco and eating like California oranges. Like that's kind of image I was getting. I don't know when this is set. It could be far into the future because and that's the image I was getting in my head while reading it.
Yeah,
it's funny you should say that because the funeral procession, I had in my mind the funeral that the mayor goes to at the beginning of The Last Hurrah. And that takes place in the early 50s because it's all about old politics versus the media politics. So, but what I'm saying is it definitely had that feel to it. And I don't know why. I don't know why it called me back to that. But to your point, Ian, that about it being taking place like, somewhere maybe between the Dust Bowl and 1940, we could say, I definitely get like a little later than what you were saying, but I definitely also got around that time period as well.
Yeah, man, it's like a Chinatown thing or something. Like it definitely has noir tinges, like you said, Chris. There's a line where, "Oh, was another case," and in parentheses, the wife did it. Like that seemed like an offhanded but also important detail, but it's still not enough to like fill everything in. But maybe the very fact that we're like sitting here trying to sort of parse it out and like getting like it's evocative to you in some way of a certain timeline in the scene.
In a discussion we had, you said it reminded you of a very Lynchian work. I said a Philip K. Dick work, especially in when do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, when they go to that random chapter towards the end that never melded for me. It's a similar feel that this doesn't. It's intriguing, but it didn't. If it was trying to say something, it obscured both the setting but also the message.
Yeah, it needs to be filled out more. Like I would love to see this piece expanded or double or triple the size, and maybe that would be helpful. But again, like I don't want to sit here in judgment of the artist, of the writer, because again, I have an affinity for this sort of stuff, and I admittedly also said that like it's tricky to pull it off, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes there's a gray area even in between that. So like I give it credit and respect on that front, but also I guess I've seen other things like it that managed to do it a little bit better. But I still think it's an interesting discussion piece, and like I said, for having randomly found it, and I assumed it was going to be like I legit, like I said, searched cyberpunk short stories, like, and this is one that came up, and that maybe it's that like we just said we can't be sure, like perhaps, but it's not clear enough details aren't filled out to give you enough one way or another. So.
If in the comments you want to tell us how we're idiots for missing it, please
certainly do that. But yeah, I mean, perhaps it would be nice to talk to the writer, perhaps, but. Yeah, like it's for a roulette story, basically, for what it is. Like, I did enjoy it, but I was also still left with wanting a bit more. So perhaps that's a positive thing to say in credit. But the fact that I was left wanting more means that there is some details, some world building stuff that even within, again, such a short framework of a story could have been maybe nailed more down in place, and that might have been more impactful, like made it more impactful for us, or at least leaving us able to parse out, tease out the message, etc. Like,
and we also have a habit of being able to tease the most obscure themes out of something.
We eat rocks and get a theme out of that, like often. And yeah, so like I don't know, like again, it's intriguing on the surface, and I'm glad that I've randomly found it or like chose this one. Even the logline itself is one of the big reasons why I even selected it. But yeah, so like you said, maybe in the comments we'll have a link to it. Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops, read it, and it'd be like, you guys obviously missed this. Okay, sure, that's fine. But I liked it for what it is, but it also was just a little more nebulous than I would have also liked. If that
I
makes
would
sense.
Certainly recommend it.
Yeah, I would too. Like again, we often say like time commitment. It's real quick. But yeah, what do you make of it? And what do you think it's supposed to mean? What kind of angles you got out of it? Like you said, it has the religion, pandemic, sort of like a noirish, like at least that one or two lines, Chris, like you mentioned, that spin to it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think it's worth a read. Absolutely, for sure. And perhaps we can crowdsource the greater message and or theme, or etc. that might have been intended to be imparted, that perhaps we're just missing, or perhaps was it intentionally obfuscated in order to foster something like this.
Are we supposed to consume this work?
I am going to eat it
Define
myself.
it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what? You can bump my score up to 6 because I'm going to recommend it. Because I wasn't going to. I'm like, well, I want Beth to read it because I want her take on it. So she said, and then I thought, oh, there's my friend Garner. I'm like, I'd be interested in what his take on it. I'm like, well, I guess I have 2 recommendations there already. So
Sure. I feel you.
I have one last point to make. I'll save this to the end. Have any of you watched American Dad?
Not in a long time.
All right. There was a running gag they had through it where Roger defecates a golden turd that's gem encrusted. And people murder each other over it. And they're imparting all this, like the dreams of what this could mean, and all of them viewed as escape. And they're just killing family members and trying to go as being passed from person to almost a cursed item. And after reading this 3 times, I'm like, this reminds me a lot of Roger's golden poop. So
perhaps it was intended as something like that, but I kind of like that angle. Yeah, I don't know, maybe. But that means I guess we're gonna because of you just changed your score real quick, Chris. It's a 5.5 in overall. Again, within the confines of our scale and with the confines of what the story is, what it does present and or is attempting to present, that is like either supposed to be between the lines or you're supposed to tease out of it. But I do think it's an intriguing read, and like I said, we'll have a link to it. And I'm glad I found it. And any other final thoughts? Any other angles that came to you guys as we talked it out? Yeah, check it out. Let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us, as always, talking about literature. I've been Scott Thurlow, and I do not have the Midas touch. And I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
have a good night, everyone.
And Chris Morgan.
peace and long life.
And we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.